Hello. Thank you for coming. Um, when there was an exhibition about this time period, and I heard about this panel, and I had to miss it. So I always regretted missing it. So now I've recreated it for the show. So hopefully it'll be enjoyable for all of you. Uh, Julie Sasse was Elaine Horwich's gallery director in both Santa Fe and Scottsdale. She also wrote quite a book on the life and times. It's not just about Elaine, it's actually about the entire art history of the Western Hemisphere, pretty much. And that came out, when, 5 years ago? When did that come out?
It came out right before COVID, if you can imagine. I call it the doorstop.
Yeah. So we're happy to have her. She saw all of this from a firsthand account. And then two of Elaine's most treasured and famous artists, Billy Schenck, and Tom Palmore. And they came from Santa Fe, we're neighbors, and to join us for this panel. So we're fairly excited. So I thought what we should do, since Julie has written the book, we're going to let her give us kind of the context of what we're talking about here for about 10 minutes. She's got some slides, and then we're going to jump in and embarrass the heck out of you guys. No, I'm just kidding.
For those of you who don't know, Elaine Horwitch was considered by many people to be one of the top contemporary art dealers in the Southwest. And she was major in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and a little bit in the early 90s. But she is the one a lot of people say is responsible for not only the Santa Fe look in fashion, but also the idea of new Western art and Southwest pop art. And you'll hear Southwest pop mostly related to Billy Schenck here. But I want to give you a couple of quick slides, if you didn't know who she was, to give you a little bit of a background of who this woman was. So that's the book. Southwest Rising was an exhibition that opened at the same time as the book at the Tucson Museum of Art. I'm recently retired from there. Oh, Jeff, how are you? Anyway, I go way back. I'm old. But anyway, so it opened at the Tucson Museum of Art. Everything came from our own collection, from the holdings, except for a few loans. And then it swiftly shut down right after we did a panel called The Bad Boys of Elaine Horwitch Gallery. These were two of them. He was so bad he got a heart attack and couldn't make it. He had to do it by Zoom. We're trying not to talk about their bad boy ways, but it'll come out, I'm sure.
No, it won't.
But anyway, basically from there, it opened at the Booth Museum, but mostly from their collection. That's how wide her collecting base was. And then it ended up at the Santa Fe Museum, the New Mexico Museum in Santa Fe, and then ultimately at the Booth Museum in the Briscoe, excuse me. So it's been around, and now I'll tell you a little bit about who she was. She was, believe it or not, actually born Elaine Sweet in a wealthy suburb of Chicago, and she developed an early interest in all things Western. As you can see, this is in her home in Santa Fe. And she collected Slim Green handmade saddles, Fritz Scholder, Acoma baskets, Apache baskets, Acoma pots. She was a voracious collector, but she also collected the top New York artists and all over the world. But she came to a dude ranch when she was in her teens in 1949, and she went to this all-girls dude ranch, and when she came back, she just had fallen in love with the West. She learned to shoot, she learned to do archery, she rode, and from then on, she was just enamored with all things Western. When she was married in 1953, her husband opened with the family business, Dina Lingerie. We used to say jokingly that her husband was into women's underwear. Some of you were there. But anyway, I had some of the worst night gear. Anyway, so she was busy raising children, not opening a gallery right away, but this is what Scottsdale looked like when she first came. So after raising 5 children and her husband's business, Dina Lingerie, took off. She spent that early time looking at the Southwest, going to Indian markets and powwows, She even had hired a rattlesnake guide to take her kids out to look for rattlesnakes. I mean, she was a very eccentric woman. At some point in 1964, her husband read Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique, and he got worried that she'd get bored as a mother as the kids grew up. And he said, Elaine, you've got to get a job. Well, she bristled at the idea, but on going to the many New York art runs, he would go there on business. She would look at museums and galleries, and she had the bright idea to start a business, I'd say like Tupperware, but without the pyramid scheme about it. She was looking to educate and inform young collectors, young women who are decorating their new homes in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley, teach them what an etching was, what a lithograph was, and then at the end, of course, these works were for sale. So she went into business with Suzanne Brown, who was a colleague of hers, and they started a business called the Art Wagon. And they took their station wagons, loaded them up with prints that they had gotten. They attended everybody's art MFA show at U of A or ASU, and even insofar as New Mexico University in Albuquerque. And so they had a wide range of art. And after a time, they were so popular that they started their own business with a location, and they grew and grew over time. But they were not the first. While they were working out of a station wagon, till their husbands said, it's either us or the business, they said, well, we like both, and they started their own gallery. The other women really had locations first, and that was Agnese Udinati, who still has a gallery on Marshall Way, and Riva Yaras. And many of you are here, know about Riva Yaras. She was one of the top galleries, high quality New York artists. And then Agnese Udinati was with Pat Hack, and they had everybody from Peter Vulkos to a number of sculptors in town, and Agnese, of course, was a sculptor in her own right. What the difference was between these women was that they each had their own niche, and what Elaine was good about was not only her ability to promote through advertising, but that she mixed New York artists with artists from the Southwest, and she wasn't afraid of looking at the West through new eyes. And when I say she looked at it, it's who she selected. She never told artists what to do. She found the artists who were doing something that she thought was a new vision. These ladies all hated each other, but they all vied for top dog status. And when I did the statistical analysis, there were more women art dealers in this town than anywhere in the country. And they all had Rolls Royces or sports cars, and if one got a new one, the other one had to outdo the other. So it was fun to watch them, and it was really hard to get interviews from everybody. They showed people like Victor Vasarely and Joan Miro, Jacques Lipschitz and Philip Guston. And at some point, Elaine got her own gallery in 1973, and she opened Elaine Horwitch Galleries, and her top person that she got when she split up with Suzanne Brown was Fritz Scholder. Fritz Scholder was just on the rise, and what she did that no one else did was full-page color ads in all the major art magazines.
That's true.
No other gallery in the Southwest, including Texas, was doing anything more than a black and white quarter-page ad. She would take out full-page ads in Architectural Digest, and that was back when they were $8,000 a page.
Whoa.
So you can imagine the money she laid out. But Fritz Scholder was one of her top artists, and everybody wanted to be like him because she bought him a Rolls Royce, and they all thought they would get one too if they joined the gallery.
We did?
They didn't, but you'll see one that they did get. And that's Fritz Scholder, an example of his work. Okay, so now we're at 1976-ish, and she's established her gallery, and then one of the people who rolled into town, and this is pivotal because she showed emerging artists and artists from this area, but she was very keen to look at artists who already had a presence back east, and that's where Bill Schenck comes in. So he rolled into town, and I'll let him tell the story, then it evolves from there. It was that wonderful magic combination of artists that were already in the foothold of the marketplace, and then the younger, lower-priced artists who are on their way up. Bill, if you would start the ball rolling of how you met Elaine.
I came here in 1975 for a group show with a small gallery on Main Street.
Louder.
You still can't hear me? No, it's very loud. Oh. So, and I remember the date specifically, it was December 7th, 1975, Pearl Harbor Day.
How old were you? 28.
13.
I don't know, 20 something.
Okay.
But I'd already had, like Tom, an international career before I came out west. I mean, I was in New York, I had a solo show in Brussels, group shows in Paris, and he had even more going on in New York and internationally than I did. Anyway, so that day, at that show, I met two major friends of mine, lifetime friends. One was Matt Thomas, who was involved with prehistoric ceramics and was a restorer, ceramic artist, and the other was Ed Mell. And we all ended up having terrific careers. So it was in the spring of 1976 that I went to see Elaine to see if I could get representation. And I remember specifically walking in the door, and I had some slides, and I think it was Jim Ratliff who was sitting at a desk right near the door, and Elaine was in the back with a table with a bunch of lady friends of hers, and I introduced myself and said, I got some slides I'd like to show you. Well, she didn't have time, she couldn't be bothered. So Jim looked at the slides, and then he goes, Elaine, come over here and take a look at this stuff. And she did. So she took me on. And I'm going to tell you, though, the difference between how I got my first show with Elaine was radically different than how Tom did. She didn't give me a show to begin with. She took on the work. She wasn't selling anything. And as luck would have it, Paul Jenkins, another New York artist, bailed out on a late spring show. And at that era, that was Scholder season. I mean, it was like the end of the season. April 15th to May 15th is what she gave me. I took Paul Jenkins' spot. I got lucky. I had 18 paintings and she sold 15 of them, so I was off and running.
Off and rolling, yeah.
And tell them about the style.
The style, if you're not familiar with my stuff, it's sort of paint by number. I don't know, you know, it's an easy way to...
It's true.
I wasn't a very good draftsman. I couldn't be a photorealist. I wasn't, you know, that good, but I was enamored with photorealism. So I projected imagery like all that first generation of photorealists did in New York. But I would trace the outlines or make outlines and separate light from dark, you know, light and shadow. And I just fell into this paint by number.
And what about the movie stills?
Well, that was where these were from. Yeah, that was when I was in New York. I'm going to back up for just a moment. When I was in Kansas City at the Art Institute it was 1967. A friend of mine said, let's go see. There's a double feature Western, and I was not a huge fan of Western films. I really didn't know any of them, with the exception of what was on TV. So we go see this double feature, and it's Italian filmmaker, Fistful of Dollars and a Few Dollars More, Sergio Leone. And man, did that guy get my attention. It was such a radically different approach to, you know, what Hollywood Westerns look like. And then while I was in Kansas City, the third one came out, The Good and Bad, the Ugly. So then I get to New York in January 1970, and it was just later that spring that the fourth one, Once Upon a Time in the West, came out. And that's when I couldn't continue painting what I was doing. I just had to do something, somehow, that was a parallel universe to what Sergio Leone had done on film, I wanted to do on canvas. So somebody suggested to me, well, why don't you use, you know, movie stills? And at that time, there were a couple of places on 14th Street and another one over in the West Village. There were little tiny shops with file cabinets filled full of hundreds of thousands of movie stills. So I would go up there and just go through different files, you know, by the name of either the actor or by the title of the film. And I just started projecting those. And they were black and white for the most part. So I invented my own color to make these images.
Okay, we're going to move. This is the artist that he replaced when he dropped out. So what's important to know then is something very Western and very pop Western. At the same time, she's showing, second generation abstract expressionist. So that mix is what I had mentioned. She was able to kind of capture everyone's interests in a wide range of styles. And then your work started to change a little bit. Oh, I just wanted to mention, we always show the men, quite frankly, because they're characters. But
really.
Suzanne Klotz was one of her big artists at the same time that Billy came on the scene. And she at the time had a big show at the Phoenix Art Museum, and that whole Airstream trailer was in that show. So there she is with Susie Klotz. But then your work evolved when you came out west.
Yeah, I started painting myself, it looks like. I guess that's evolutionary. Not quite, but almost. Yeah, so then I started painting cowboys and Cadillacs. That was a direct influence from when I was in high school. That was one Western I saw. My then girlfriend wanted to take me to see a movie called HUD. In 1964, it was Paul Newman. And and even though it was a black and white film, they made it obvious that he was driving a pink 58 Cadillac. And I thought, this is way too cool. So when I started selling paintings again, I couldn't find a 58 Cadillac to begin with, so I got this 1963 white Cadillac and restored it. The next car I got was a pink 1958 Cadillac.
That's my truck.
This is Tom's truck. And I was with Elaine the day that she bought this from, it was over on Marshall Way. These two wound up, hyped up Coke dealers came in. They needed cash. I don't know how much it was, but she got this thing for a rock bottom, crazy good deal. And it had a 400 and something cubic inch Cadillac engine in it. And
which I replaced.
and then Tom ended up buying it or trading it,
427 Cobra Jet engine.
is what he put in it.
This hung in her house in Santa Fe for many, many years.
And it hangs in Santa Fe now too, in a gallery. We tried to get it for this talk, but
Yeah, it's for sale.
quite
And we
large.
want to get it in the museum. So you guys could like donate a whole bunch of money, get it placed in the museum,
Yeah.
and make my day.
All right, so we do want to get to the art market. So one of the things that Elaine did a lot of was trade her artists for, if they liked indigenous artifacts, then she would buy them and then say, I'll trade you one of these things for your paintings. Or she would do a trade with get this kind of truck and then get paintings out of, didn't she get the
Is that
buffalo
what she got
painting
from
from you
you?
for that?
Actually, it's what happened is I loved that truck. And in her house, she had a 6x8 foot painting of a buffalo.
Yeah.
And she said, what about trading the buffalo for the truck? And I said, you got it. So, damn thing nearly killed me, but it's all right. No.
This was, again, early 80s. I don't know if 1981. I started beginning beyond, black and white and color movie stills. And at the grocery checkout counter, there were these, what are, those, what were they called? Enquirer and stuff like that.
Tabloids.
Tabloids, right. So I started using those, and I go back to the studio, and I would, the figures in the foreground were for Saturday Evening Post from the 1920s. So I would cut and paste and put all this stuff together, and that's one of my own kind of drawings in the back from, another photograph. And when I got it to be what I thought was an okay looking mess, I'd photograph that with slide film, and then I'd project the whole thing and then make that, into a painting. There's another self-portrait. Very autobiographical for that era. And then I remember a studio assistant I hired. He was, what do you call, calligrapher? They can do, so he would do all the writing for me on these things, and I thought it was brilliant, having to drop the second G from Kellogg so I wouldn't get sued for, copyright abuse. And, but I never did hear from Kellogg.
Back in those days, I was the director of the Elaine Horwitch Galleries, and I would design dresses to match the opening. So if it was David Chrysler, I dressed as a druid in some kind of a druid dress. And for this one, I had a flamingo pink dress with one arm, with a little thumb thing so that I looked like the neck of the flamingo. Irregular, I mean, everybody got their own dress. I never saved those dresses, but Merrill Mahaffey, he actually painted a dress for me, and so I was wearing a landscape. So everything was bigger than life. People came, it was just thick with people every opening, every Thursday night art walk, and so it was a scene as well as, you know, lots and lots of sales.
Yeah, I would add that the crazier and wilder I got with my subject matter in this era, I kept pushing it to see, you know, if I'd have any market, you know, sales out of these things, and they did. They just kept selling and selling, and I thought, wow, this is absolutely insanely wonderful. This one was, I was then living with another artist, Ann Coe, and that is Elaine's Rolls Royce, 52 Hooper-bodied Rolls. And I also like doing social and political statements. So if you look at the license plate, this was 1982. We were going through our second big oil crisis, and the Texans were really getting clobbered. And so I decided he would be my political statement, or at least a social commentary on the state of existence in Texas. So I put, you know, on the license plate, it says star-studded state, broke, and that, you know, with the outline of Texas on it. And on Ann's, the wingtips, those are oil derricks.
All right, we're going to move on.
Okay.
In 1976, Elaine had been looking for many years, since the 50s actually, going out to the Santa Fe Opera. And in the 70s, she decided that she would like to break into the Santa Fe market. There were no contemporary galleries at that time. There were Taos Society of Artists, there was Santa Fe Colony, there was one or two artist co-ops, but there were no contemporary galleries except for maybe one. This is the space she took. This was originally the artisans or the native market. That was a WPA funded gallery so that children from the villages could be taught the early Santos carving and the tin working, and they would all bring their work here to the market. So it had a history of being a space where art and artifacts and crafts would all come together. And it was owned by Leonora Curtin Palahamo, whose husband was a Finnish ambassador. So this was the meeting place. Every celebrity would come into town. Fritz Scholder was the opening show, and this is where a lot of the action was in terms of the celebrities and the big sales. And this is where Tom Palmore comes in. Take it away.
Thank you very much. I almost fell asleep here. I didn't know if I was part of this or not.
Make the most of it.
Thank you so much. Look how cute I used to be. Anyway, I want to tell you the story how I met Bill Schenck. So we were both showing in the same gallery in New York in Soho, at Mizell Gallery.
Yeah, Lou Mizell.
Lou Mizell. So I walk in there. I was standing there talking to Mizell, and Bill walks in, and so we started talking. He introduced us, and so he said, "You two guys ought to get along because you're both from Texas." And he said, "Okay, fine." Bill said, "Do you want to go across the street and get a beer?" I said, "Sure." So we're walking across the street, and I said, "I'm not from Texas." He said, "Me either." I said, "Okay." and we've been friends ever since.
How did you get to know Elaine?
Okay, so because Elaine advertised in all of the National Art magazine, full page, color, this and that, I was living in Philadelphia. I went to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. A side note, my best friend in art school was David Lynch, the filmmaker. Anyway, so I taught for a year at the University of Texas in Austin, so I wanted to move out west. And so I knew that she was going to be at an art expo in Washington, D.C. So I went down. I was also in the show in D.C. So I went down to D.C. and went over to her booth. And this is so typical, Elaine, I can't believe it. So I introduced myself, and in those days we had sheets of 35 millimeters transparencies that you would show them. They put them on a light box, and people would study them and look at them and make a decision and blah, blah, blah. So I handed her a couple of sheets. She held them up to the light like this, put the next one up, and she said, "When do you want to have a show?" I said, "What?" I said, "When's a good time?" She said, "Next August." I said, "I'm in." That was it. So
Can you see the difference? She didn't want anything to do with me. She loves Tom.
And back then you were known as the Gorilla Man, were you not?
I was, because the Philadelphia Art Museum owns a 5x7 foot painting of a reclining gorilla of mine called Reclining Nude. It's been in the New York Times. It was in the movie Dressed to Kill, Angie Dickinson, you know, blah, 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 this and that. So the painting was very, very famous. So, yeah, that's it. So I was known in Philadelphia as the Gorilla Man. When most people met me, they were disappointed because I wasn't big and hairy. Sorry. But anyway, so I did, what's my line? I was on What's My Line too. Yeah, will the real Tom Palmore please stand up? Of course they all guessed me, but yeah, they had a couple of my paintings and things like that. So at that point I was showing in Paris, I was showing in Philadelphia, I was showing in Chicago, I was showing in New York, and but I really wanted to move out west. You know, I'm originally from southern Oklahoma, raised a lot of animals and things like that, had a paint pony when I was a kid, all the classic stuff. This painting is in the Booth Museum. It's called Mr. Impressive, which actually is a real bull, and from Arizona, Douglas, Arizona. And this painting is 6 by 8 feet. I used to paint really large all the time. And Elaine sold everything that I put in the gallery, which was fantastic. And so, where was I?
So Tom.
Tom.
Hello, Tom.
Yes, what? Hello?
Over here.
Yeah.
So your work changed when you moved to Santa Fe.
Yes, I
Your
started.
subject matter
Yeah, I've been painting animals for many years, and you know, and so I started doing more Western animals when I moved out west. You know, longhorn bulls.
Talk
too close. Anyway, so yeah, you know, everything from jackrabbits to coyotes to no buzzards. But anyway, yeah, I started painting Western subjects.
I want to say just one thing before we move from that slide. You see this cast shadow that's in the painting? And this was real typical of what Tom was doing at that time, and I was so fascinated with it. I stole that concept and put it into my own paint by numbers. I did. So when I have bucking horses in the sky and all that with a cast shadow behind them, I got it from Tom.
It's true.
Now we're going to look at a couple of works. This was one of the is this the one that we?
That's the one I traded for the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 by 8 foot buffalo, a Texas flag. Yeah. This is called Raven with well, it's actually called Survivor. It's about Georgia O'Keeffe because you know she had such an incredibly long, productive life, and that's one of her paintings in the background. It's a raven. This is in the New Mexico Museum in Santa Fe.
So what I want to interject here is, coming from the standpoint of a salesperson or a director, not only did I have to work with these crazy men, but I was there writing up the sales. And at one point in Santa Fe, it was literally like a grocery store. I would write up sales all day long without a break, except to pick up the stack of invoices and get them back to the guys in the back who would then prepare them all for the crating guys to pick them up. They had so many sales happening that trucks came from Scottsdale on a regular basis, loaded up with art to keep supplying the beast. And from all over, and it would happen vice versa coming back to Scottsdale. So Atlantic Richfield would buy Tom Palmore's works. Ranchers all had to have their favorite bull painted. And so these guys were working from morning till night except for the obligatory parties that we all had to go.
We
but
were so
this
rich
is what
and
happened
famous
at
then.
Horwitch.
We were making a lot of money and spending it on all the kinds of illegal things.
All right, this is a good spot to quickly tell your story about your percentages. Bill, I know this story.
Oh, yeah. I still hold well, of course, I hold the record now because Elaine's not with us anymore. But when I came into the gallery in spring of 1976, because I had been a New York and an international artist, I insisted on a 60-40 split, which she was not doing. Everybody, I guess, my understanding was a 50-50. And I refused to do that. So over the years, I left the gallery 3 different times over that same issue, and I came back a 4th time. So I held the record for coming and going. And once, we were in Santa Fe, and it was during Indian Market, and I came in, and she always did this in front of like an entire crowd of people. And this would be, I think, 1977 or 78, and I'm a big baseball fan. And so she said, I walked in the door, and she always took me, really by surprise. She said, I want a 5-year exclusive. And I said, okay, I'm yours. $365,000 a year for 5 years. And I got that figure because Reggie Jackson had just signed from the Baltimore Orioles. He was the first big-time free agent. And he signed with the Yankees for $400,000 a year. And I thought, that's a good number. So, okay, I threw that shut her up.
They had a lot of antics to get paid as well, but we'll go on and then talk about that later. There were other artists, of course.
yeah.
These
That's
guys
not
are
mine.
here. That's why we're favoring them today. But one of her other well-known artists was James Havard, now deceased, but they were good friends back in the day when they went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Arts together, along with David Lynch, who's also recently deceased. But this was an example of one of James's paintings. He was known as an abstract illusionist. It was a short-lived movement, but he was one of the top people. And again,
He was the inventor of this movement.
yes, and he moved out from New York to live in Santa Fe as well. So people were drawn to Santa Fe, coming from the bigger cities. Of course, they were also coming to Scottsdale and Tucson and LA. They were leaving New York. They didn't feel they needed that market so much as long as there were outlets in Chicago. And at the time, Scottsdale, believe it or not, was the 5th largest art market, I think, per capita. So it was a big, heady time. But he was featured in all the big magazines as well and got a lot of
I want to
spreads.
interject one thing about Elaine picking up James Havard. I was the one, and Tom, who introduced James's work to her, and so she
He's
said,
taking credit.
"What?"
He's
I'm not-
taking credit.
Pardon me?
He's taking credit for that.
Actually, I knew James long before Bill
No, I
even
know
heard his
that,
name.
but Elaine didn't. I'm saying that you and I introduced James
No,
to
we
Elaine.
didn't. I did.
He's lying. This is.
Moving on.
He
Well, wait a
doesn't
minute.
take credit for stuff I do.
Tell
So
the
here's what
story.
happened. This was in the spring, and it's getting warm. I'm ready to go back up to my summer home in Jackson Hole, and I wanted to, Elaine always owed me money because she was selling paintings, drawings, whatever. And I just, I said, well, just give me $5,000 so I can get up there and get a studio assistant and get settled. She says, well, what if I don't pay you right now? I owe you actually about $12,000. Can I use 10 of it to go to New York and buy some of James' work so I can, induce him to come out to the gallery? So that's how James came to the Elaine Horwitch Gallery, was on my dime.
That's a great story. It's not true, but it's a
It's-
great story.
It's so
I
totally
love
true.
that story.
Now we're moving on.
Write it down.
Tom, we're moving on. We're moving on. Elaine loved George O'Keeffe. A lot of people, she didn't represent her. Of course, Stieglitz pretty much was in charge of that. But she did go up, and I interviewed many of the staff who went up to Abiquiu to visit her, to buy work from her, and at some point to visit Juan Hamilton to get O'Keeffe paintings. And if you look at the National Gallery's catalog raisonné of O'Keeffe's, she brokered at least 15 paintings. Joe Baker had a good story about something that was happening at the Corcoran, and Louise Nevelson was sitting at the front of a long line of people coming to pay homage with George O'Keeffe right next to her, and she grabbed Joe by the arm, marched to the front of the line, and of course she showed Louise Nevelson's work. She's bought O'Keeffe's, so she felt she could do that, and she just had chutzpah, got to the front of the line and said, I want you to meet this young artist, Joe Baker, and she made sure that all of her artists got to meet these big name artists when they came through. And so she had a number of O'Keeffe paintings that she brought to the art fairs, and it helped to give credibility and credence to all levels of artists in her gallery. Another artist that she had who was a big name in Santa Fe was John Fincher, who is, as you can see, just recently passed away.
I own that painting.
You own that painting, I know. He owns the
Yeah,
painting.
we had that at the auction house. You bought it?
Yeah, I bought it
Oh, tell that.
from your auction.
Yeah.
It's very incestuous. But anyway, what she
Probably
loved
not
is
true.
she loved. What did he say?
Probably not true.
Oh, so anyway, she loved
I'm
color.
just saying. You know.
She loved a sense of humor. She loved mastery of painting. She loved expressiveness. She loved the humor and this twist on the traditions of the West. And John Fincher exemplified that, as did Tom and Billy. And then, of course, Bob Wade, he was one of the bad boys. He would go to many of her Indian market parties, and he would trade her paintings for apologies for misbehaving at her parties, because he had a
I
tendency
believe
to
that
drink.
one.
That one's true.
I believe that.
That is true. But anyway, unfortunately, he passed away from a heart attack a month before the opening of the Southwest Rising show. So again, the bad boys had their day.
Actually, Tom and I are the only ones left.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know,
So,
and I'm not
now they
feeling so
behave.
good.
So.
Would you
And
say?
that was
I said, when I'm
Bob.
not feeling so good.
Bob was.
And
Go
speaking
ahead.
of the bad boys, one of the other artists from this era, a woman, was Susan Hertel, and Vincent Valerino down the hall has an absolutely beautiful painting of hers in his booth. So stop by there and take a look when you're.
I have a quick good story about Susan Hertel's work. Robert Redford loved to collect her work. He bought many paintings by her. And what's significant for Elaine Horwitch is that was her last opening in Santa Fe. She died the night of Susan's opening. But anyway, so I'm sitting in the front of that gallery that you saw, that old one, and earlier I had gushed to Robert Redford what a fan I was of him, and all of the young women in the gallery all had great stories about, you know, if he was kind to them or if he remembered their name. We all had crushes on him. But he hurt my feelings because he kind of brushed me aside because I said what a fan I was, and I was ashamed, but I was also hurt. So the next time he came in, I was busy typing wall labels, and he said, "Hi, I've come in to see some Susan Hertel paintings." And I said, "Just a minute, I'll be right with you." I mean, I can't believe I had the gall. But I finished typing my wall label, and then I picked up some David Bradley paintings so that I didn't waste my time. And I said, "Okay, now you can come with me." Can you believe I did that? So anyway, every time I see Susan Hertel paintings, I think about how brash I was. But
That's probably
Yeah,
true.
and Julie, you mentioned Elaine's passing. I think you told me this story that she passed away holding a Snickers bar in a People's Magazine. Is that
yeah,
is that true?
One of her biggest research sources was People magazine, and she had instructed her whole staff to be on the lookout, both in Scottsdale and in Santa Fe, for any celebrities, because she didn't know everybody. But People magazine was what she would use. So Goldie Hawn came in, and Diane Keaton came in, and Arnold Schwarzenegger came in, and everybody was coming through either because they were told this is the place to go, or to find out what the latest party was, or the best restaurant. And so basically, you know, it was one of this, you know, constant revolving doors. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. What would you say? What was the golden years for Elaine Horwich's gallery? When was it like in its prime? For some context.
Well, for me, it was 1977 to about 1988.
I would say about the same for me. 81 through the 80s into the early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Julie, you've researched this era obviously for the book. What do you think brought it to an end, and when do you think it ended?
Okay.
And why? So.
I just threw up a couple of other artists that she showed. Harry Fonseca's got a show at the Heard Museum right now, and there's another booth or two that have Fonseca works here. What happened, I think, really was a couple of things. She died at 58 years old, and around that time, the stock market crashed, the Kuwaiti War was raging, everything was changing. And at some point, and some of you guys in the audience who were in the Horwitch Gallery, Nick, I don't know if you remember this, she actually told people, if you have to make a sale out of your home, out of your studio, do it. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to keep you from making a sale, because we've got to get through this rough time together. I even, as a joke, bought as a birthday present for her one of those, ice cream parlor take a number things. And she didn't like that. She was very unhappy with me, but I had it mounted outside of her office because people were coming in all day long to get advances. And she knew that things were going bad. And I may have a slide of her gallery. This was her gallery in Scottsdale. Of course, it's still there, but she had it built and designed as a gallery. It was one of the first of its kind. And then at the time, you may remember, Merrill Mahaffey was on the rise. He was a big artist there. Beth Ames Swartz, Scottsdale artist, who's still very active today. So she was taking the cream of the crop in this area. Here's a picture of us together. I love that pose. Who do I think I am? I'm like, I'm there with Elaine Horwitch. But what happened is the market started to go bad. She had expanded into Sedona. She later expanded into Palm Springs. So she had really, in a way, unintentionally expanded. And so she had invested too much. She had more than 250 artists, because each gallery got to have artists from Santa Fe, Sedona, Scottsdale, Palm Springs. So there was so many mouths open and very little sales at one point.
Bill, you've continued to have a very successful career. You sell quite well in galleries across the West. But obviously things have changed since then. What is different between your market and selling now versus then? How has it changed?
Well, I think the biggest thing is when we were with Elaine, that was the entire contemporary Western art market. I mean, there was just, a dozen of us, 2 dozen at the most. And since then, it's just expanded exponentially. Now there's, God, I don't know, 200, 250, contemporary Western artists, or Western artists, some of them painting in a more traditional style, and a lot more galleries. In my opinion, it's just become way more competitive to try to keep a career alive,
Here's a couple of his more recent works. You want to say?
Notice the shadow.
Yeah, see there's Tom's shadow, but it's a hard edge. See it?
He doesn't know how to make a soft edge shadow.
I can't. But I'll tell you what, we were both masters of appropriation.
Tom, do you think Elaine's passing affected your career at all?
What's that?
Do you think Elaine's passing affected your career?
Do I think Elaine's
Passing
when
away?
she died, did it?
Yes, yeah, I did. I mean, it was a hard blow for everybody. It really was. She was such an incredible character and such a force in the Western art and stuff. And I mean, I was very friendly with Elaine. We used to ride horses together. I used to take her to country western bars to see some talent that I thought that she might enjoy. Things like I flew with her in her plane to various locations. I mean, she was an incredible force. I mean, she really, really was. And she had the kind of personality where you wanted to please her, and you wanted to make her happy. You wanted to make her like you, and you also wanted to make her sell your work. But that was harder to do. But no, she was phenomenal. She really was.
Billy?
Josh, I just wanted to add too that after she died, my career just fell right off a cliff for some years.
Really?
I mean, that happened for all of us. I mean, out of all those artists,
Well,
a whole ton of them.
I was showing in New York, and for a 10-year period, I would have a show in Santa Fe and a show in New York. A show in Santa Fe. It was about to kill me because it takes a long time to do what I do, but I did that for about a 10-year period. And, then, I show with Gerald Peters, I show with Lou Ellen and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's still a Western market, but, she was dearly, dearly missed in the whole concept of things.
And Julie, I want to ask you a question. This is something I've noticed. So I think at the time, you know this better than anyone, there was a big connection between Scottsdale and Santa Fe. People would have galleries in Scottsdale. They'd have them from September to May. They'd lock the door in May, move to Santa Fe, be there from May to September. And the cities were they're both kind of quaint little cute Western towns, one a winter town and one a summer town. How and why do you think that connection kind of changed or ended, if it did, between Scottsdale and Santa Fe?
Well, one, of course, is a summer-based business. And then the truth is, what Elaine did that was different is she didn't close up. She stayed open in both locations. So she would shift her attention to Santa Fe right after the Chicago Art Fair. And then the truckloads would come straight from Scottsdale, and they would go back and forth all summer long. And so then it would shift again when Zozobra was over, actually. So after Indian Market, after Spanish Market, after Zozobra, then she would start to shift. All the trucks would be coming west, and they would go to Scottsdale. So I think that changed because it became a year-round market. Scottsdale grew up, people didn't leave town, they stayed all year round. And in Santa Fe, it got bigger and bigger where everybody didn't leave town. The skiing crowd would come in, and so there was always a market. Maybe more staff would come in. She would actually fly out maybe 5 extra staff, and then she would put them up in a house nearby so that she would have all of her staff with her. So we would travel around.
All right. And we're kind of running out of time. So
No,
I
we're
know
not.
we want the audience to ask questions. I just want to say myself too, I'm big fans of everything right here to the left of me. This book, there's books that document a moment in time in the art world that are very important. I think Julie's does that. Billy's work still, again, collectors and admirers around the country. And he's a very close friend and a big fan of his work. I've always loved Tom's work, but we just met doing this panel. And I think he's a huge, wonderful talent as well. So let's thank the three of them for being here today.
I just tried to keep it honest, you know what I mean? I just tried to keep it truthful.
And
That's very important.
And you see the cycle. I mean, these were the bad boys of art. Now they're the elder statesmen giving the bad boys advice. So we've seen it all kind of come back.